All right, what's up, everyone? Here we are, hole three. Um, Now, one of the things that I typically like to do with this wind, I guess we're going to go for this. Typically I might like to go with like a 3-wood and just try to, aim for this gap a little bit. I think we're going to kind of go for it. And, keep in mind, we're using the G as kind of our reference point. So I'm thinking somewhere around here looks pretty good. Now, what I typically do here is I typically go max curl. Now, the driver's the one situation where I don't have to play it like this. I'm kind of optionally playing it like this. With the woods, you typically have to do a C3 shot. The driver's the one exception where I could probably play this a little bit different and aim more at the pin and do a B3 shot. However, I like keeping things consistent, and since I play it this way with the woods, I think it's kind of a nice way to play it. But optimally, I would say it'd be better to have both shots in your repertoire. But typically, what I'll try to do here is lay up a little bit short intentionally, because I don't want to really get it to the hole unless I have it going right on line. Like this would have to be perfect. So I have to figure out, and you can see where my G is. It's essentially like kind of course. So I reset it on accident. I was just trying to point, like this is kind of the spot, and I'm just kind of coming in on the right edge of that bunker there. If the wind was straight, maybe I'd aim just a little bit more right than this. I'm coming in, and I'm thinking this looks pretty good for my initial setup. Now, when you do this, you want to make sure that you're maximizing your C3s. That way you get consistent results every time. So that means when you're pulling down, make sure that you're pulling almost sideways back and almost sideways through. So you'll see that my screen pull is very exaggerated. And I just kind of wait for that one point. And as you can see, it just rolls up there. Oh, it's not going to hold up. So I had the line. I thought with that headwind that the driver would actually not roll through quite that much. That was pretty extreme with the grabber. So another thing I could have done with the super grabber, it wouldn't have rolled through very much. And that's a problem because I needed it to roll out. You could see I had that right on line with how I wanted it. So if I wanted to improve on that shot, how would I do it? So the only other solution is to kind of go gold tee high and then do that very similar shot. Let's just go back to the tee box and just kind of work through this, because very similarly, oh no, I'm in contest mode, crap. So I can't do that, unfortunately. Well, we can try to go for this. I still think I'm pretty high percentage to make this. And so with that being said, the mistake isn't necessarily the worst that it could be. I'll typically play a little bit more. How in the world did that happen? Disadvantages of being on the PC. Let me try to reset this real quick just to see where center line is. I think that's maybe too much wind. Thinking somewhere in here. So to do an improvement, as I was talking about trying to go back to the tee, one of the things that I would probably do would be to try to do the B3 method. Now the B3 method is going to change your aim entirely. Instead of me aiming to the right of the hole, I'm going to now need to point the target to the left of the hole with a B3 shot, because it's not going to hook nearly as much. So I would actually have to start my initial setup to the left of the pin, and it's not going to curl back as hard, but it's going to land a lot softer. So that wouldn't have rolled through into this back sand. However, from the back sand, what I'll typically do, especially when it says upslope, we're going to go streak out of this bunker. So that's typically what I'll do with the top spin. This is going to keep it optimally rolling out as much as possible. Now, one of the things that you'll see that happens is when this club shortens, because it typically is 41, it's reduced to 33. So you can kind of see the percentage kind of on the screen. So it still kind of shows you kind of more or less that this is essentially the pins maybe at 60, 65%. And you can just see it by measuring the depth or eyeballing that depth. However, we might need to go, well, these are kind of going to be offsetting. So you see we have a little bit of tailwind, which is going to push the ball down farther. But then on the converse side of that, we have an uphill shot. So which one's going to prevail? Which one's stronger? Is it the tailwind? And it's really just kind of distance dependent. This ball isn't going to it's not going to spend a lot of time in the air because it's going to be so low to the ground that the ball really can't affect it too much when you're down low like this. So I would think that the over prevailing here would be the uphill. So 65% might not be enough. You might want to bump this up to 70. Where, let's say this was on flat ground, or, even worse if it was above your feet, which thankfully doesn't happen very often. But in the event that it was, the wind would probably prevail more, and whatever the wind is, you'd have to factor in a lot more wind than I am right now, because I'm not really factoring in a ton of wind. But as I mentioned, I'm thinking, so where's that, 65, up 70's up here. I'm thinking pretty close to 70. I don't know if I needed to exactly get on to 70. I was probably trying to stay a little bit light, but I don't want to reset this. So we're just going to essentially go for it here and then just try to make sure that, we push up as straight as possible. And as I mentioned, if I would have had that little bit of less speed that I was trying to hit, that 8%, it probably would have came in slower and it would have gently rolled into the cup. So it did end up costing me. However, if my wind play was more exact, it would have been in either way. So as I mentioned, I expect to make that shot a high percentage of the time anyway. Anytime I'm lower than half club, I feel pretty confident in my wind play. I thought I was pretty close there, especially with the fact that it was so uphill, not having to play as much wind. But as you can see, just less than a cup. It was very close. And again, if it would have just came in with just a little bit less power, it would have took that break and it would have been in either way. But if I would have had the alignment and it would have actually landed on playing with the hole, I could have probably hit it 68 or 70% and both would have probably went in. It's one of the things I do like about this game is the cup's not overly sensitive, which I think is very desirable for a mobile game. So let's talk about this. Now, typically, if you guys have seen my sheets on the, you know what, I have to cut this up, so hold on.